Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. This is a beautiful spring morning. I am here, I am happy, and I just wanted to share a message with you. My name is Brother Omar El Rashid, and I am a author, poet, and peaceful hearts guide. And I am just a little bit about me. I was going through some struggles with bipolar disorder for many years, and I was pushed to the brink such that I was pushed almost over the edge and attempted suicide a few times. And alhamdulillah, God graced me and blessed me with the ability to come back and not just survive, but to thrive. And now I'm passing on the message of how to find hope and live in peace in the aftermath of depression, anxiety, and bipolar. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about toxic relationships, and in particular intimate relationships, but I guess this could also apply to family or friends or whatever else. So just a little bit about me. I was married, I have children. My ex-wife took my children and is now currently actively, even today, keeping me away from my children, which is a very devastating and difficult situation to be in. But one of the things that I realized in the aftermath of the relationship and everything else that happened is that it is all too easy to become bitter and to become angry at the way that we've been treated. And so I realized, and actually just in the last couple of weeks, I've been working more and more intensely on this issue, which is why I'm sharing it now. And there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of rage, and there was a lot of disappointment in how things happened and why things happened and those kinds of things. And I will not say it was easy. It was very difficult. It was difficult not only to experience being kept away from your children. And one of the things that I realized as a child growing up, my parents divorced, and one of the things that I realized, and I've shared this before, that I was blessed that both of my parents really did love me. But what I realized at an early age is that they hated each other more than they loved me. And that was a very painful feeling growing up. And I decided that I actually never wanted a divorce in the first place, but nobody does. But my point is that I decided, when we decided to actually go forward with this divorce and go forward and separate ways, I decided that I would never bring out my anger and animosity on my ex, and I would also never do that to my children. That was a principle and an oath that I made to myself, that I would be peaceful and amicable in all circumstances. And one of the things that ended up happening is that even though I made that oath and I bound myself to that oath, not everybody else does, and obviously my ex-partner did not either. And so in this way, I decided ultimately that because there was anger and because there was one-sided kindness and one-sided benevolence, I decided that I had to ultimately handle those anger emotions and those rage emotions. Of course, I'm not putting them on my children because I can't even talk to them at this point. Hopefully that will be resolved sometime soon. But I decided that for my own self, for my own sanity, and for my own soul, I needed to resolve these feelings of anger. And, there are a lot of toxic things that a lot of people do. And one of the things that was helpful for me in getting over these toxic actions that were done by my ex was that ultimately I realized a couple of things. Number one, she experienced in her life her own baggage, her own trauma, her own difficulties in life that brought her to the point in which she was not able to do better or make better choices. Now, ultimately, all human beings, in order to do anything, need to be both willing and able. And if we don't know any better, we might assume that somebody is able, but simply unwilling to do the right thing. And that's possible. But it's also possible that that person is not able, even though they are trying and they are willing, but they're simply not able to do better. And you might say, well, that you're giving everybody a pass in the world. Well, I'm giving them a pass in the world for my benefit, not for theirs. Because if I hold on to the belief that she was able to do better and simply maliciously, negatively chose to hurt me and chose to do things that were negative in my life, that creates anger and blame and hostility, which ends up with a negative and a strange relationship with my children, right? Because ultimately, it's harder to be kind to the mother of your children if you're holding everything that they've ever done against you. The reality is we're no longer together. I should be able to move past these negative feelings, and that's what my goal was ultimately. And so in this way, I decided to make a choice for myself. And this choice was, if I have to choose between her being unwilling or being unable, I'm choosing unable. She couldn't do better. That's because of the stresses in her life. And yes, we can all heal and we can all do this. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she didn't have the capacity to do so. It's none of my business. That's her work, not mine. That's her work. And so for me, I just have to come to the peace and the balance that even though mistakes were made, even though errors were made, willing or unwilling, intentional or unintentional, they're not my business anymore. I have to move on and resolve that anger with peace. But the other thing that I have to do is not just say, oh, well, now I understand intellectually, okay, she wasn't willing, therefore it's all said and done. No, you have to express those emotions. And I actually spent sometime last week really focusing in on what those feelings of anger were. And one of the things that I realized was that I was very angry at, the things in our relationship that didn't go well, the way that I was treated, and there were things that I'm not going to really go into, but I expressed all of those emotions, and I expressed that anger in a safe way, in a, private space, in the, sanctity of my own home. But I expressed that anger and I released it and I let it out. Because one of the things that, as I've mentioned before, if you conceal and hold back your emotions, they fester and they boil over and they explode. But if you just let them out and express them and validate them and honor that anger, then you're able to let it go and then transition forward. But one of the interesting things that I wanted to share with you was that in this process of releasing the anger towards my ex and literally forgiving, and actually right after it happened, I decided to just send a message and say, hey, whatever's past is past, I forgive, let's move forward, whatever. And it ended up being a really healing moment. It was very beautiful. But one of the things that I realized in that process of the anger, and I don't know if this applies to you, it may not, but in my life, I realized that not only was there anger at my spouse for what she did, there was also anger at myself for choosing that spouse, and for getting started in this in the first place. There was a lot of self-blame. There was a lot of self-hatred. There was a lot of self-animosity. And I realized that I had to grieve and express that anger too. And that was kind of awkward. I mean, honestly, letting out anger, being upset and angry at yourself is sort of a difficult thing to do. And it was hard to express anger generated and directed toward myself. But, it was there. And so I let it go, and I realized that part of the reason I was so angry at myself was because I felt like I was fooled. I felt like I was taken advantage of for too long. I felt like I never should have gotten into this in the first place. I should have known better. How stupid was I? These were kinds of messages that I was telling myself in my anger. How could you be so stupid? How could you have fallen for that? How could you have been duped? And the reality is I didn't know better at that point. And I give myself permission to forgive myself for the mistakes I made yesterday, to correct my actions and move on with my life. Because, and this is something that I say often, the life of this world is so short. We're here for 50, 70, 100 years. We have an eternity in the next life. So if you make a mistake in this life, don't cry over spilt milk. Grieve your loss, express your anger, express your frustration at the loss, then grieve, cry it out, and then move on. Because we don't have an eternal life here on this earth. We have an eternal life in the next life. But for now, all I have to do is express my emotions and move on with my life. Yes, it was the marriage didn't work. The relationship didn't work. It was toxic. It was not good for either of us, apparently, right? Obviously. And so it wasn't good while it lasted, but we can move on and leave it behind us, and I don't have to punish myself for the next 100 years because of a mistake I made 10 years ago. I don't. And neither do you. No one has to hold on to the mistakes of yesterday for the rest of their lives. Let it go, move on. If you break a cup, you try to put it back together. If you can't put it back together, you throw it away and you go on with your life. The whole of life is not contained in one relationship, and it doesn't have to be. But the only way you can let it go and have peace in the aftermath of a toxic relationship is to express the emotions in a safe space, express those emotions, grieve the loss, and then find the peace afterwards. And so I'm actually in a much happier state. I've been working on this anger for a while now, especially as things have gotten complicated and things were going well for a while, and I was connected with my kids, and then I was cut off, and it was just a negative situation. But I found that by being at peace and forgiving and being able to process and release that toxic relationship, I was able to feel much more internal peace. Now, I wanted to share a comment, which is that a lot of people say, well, that they don't deserve to be forgiven. My toxic partner in the past doesn't deserve to be forgiven. One of the things that you have to remember is that God is the ultimate judge, and God will bring people to account for what they are and aren't guilty of. We don't have access to that information, but you don't forgive somebody else because they deserve it or they don't deserve it. You forgive other people because you don't deserve to hold on to the aftermath and the toxic damage from that not forgiveness. Unspoken resentment is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. I'm hurting myself by not forgiving my ex. We are hurting ourselves by not forgiving the people who have been toxic in our lives. We're not hurting the other person. They don't feel it, they don't know it, they don't see it, it doesn't faze them in the least. We are drinking that poison. I decided to stop drinking poison. I didn't want it in my life. It doesn't serve me, it doesn't serve her, it doesn't serve my kids, even if I didn't have kids. It doesn't serve the relationship. It doesn't serve humanity. It doesn't serve God. There's no reason to hold on to a toxic relationship or into those toxic feelings after a toxic relationship. Just let it go. And that's what I ended up choosing to do, and I'm actually a much happier person for it. And I just wanted to share these ideas and these principles, and hopefully they're of benefit. I pray they are. I pray that you find peace in whatever toxic relationships you've had in your past, and I hope that you find the courage and the strength to move forward. I do want to share that there is a link in this video, so if you are interested in starting the process of healing, whether from a toxic relationship or from other situations and challenges with depression, anxiety, and bipolar, the link is in the description, so you can go ahead and check it out. And I'm actually really excited that there is a new publication that's coming out that I'm going to be sharing about one of the proven techniques for establishing happiness and getting over depression and anxiety. And it's a really beautiful text, and I'm really excited to be able to share that in the next couple of days, hopefully, God willing. And so stay tuned for that. And that's all I've got for today. So if you enjoyed this, please like it, share it, let other people know what's going on, invite people to take that survey. I've actually taken the survey and decided to make it for the international community. So I'm actually hoping to reach 1,000 Muslims who are struggling with depression, anxiety, and bipolar. And this is a relief effort to help encourage people to find the healing that they need. So if you're able to share this to your networks, I would really appreciate it. That way we can get in touch and help and serve more people who are struggling. And it really is a difficult situation when you're struggling with these issues. And there is peace and there is relief. And I'm hoping to be able to connect people with it. Praying for you and your family. Hope that you have an awesome day. And wa alaikum assalam. Peace be upon you all.